Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. It is great to be back with you live here on our YouTube channel, and just give you a little backdrop about where we're at right now, where I'm at right now. I took a red-eye flight home to the East Coast from the West Coast. I was in Southern California over the past few days, as you might have noticed. If you watched Monday and Tuesday's newscasts, I was at TBN's Tustin, California studio. And a great thing about it was I was able to bring my family with me as well. So that was a lot of fun. We had some beach time, of course, took my daughter to Disneyland, and also, of course, filmed at TBN, a mixture of business and pleasure, as they say. But, you know, I have to say Southern California, and we've got a lot to talk about today, by the way, but just to let you know where I'm at. And Southern California, a beautiful place, obviously. And I know there'll be a lot of commenters. It's a mess the way it's governed and the left-wing madness going on there. And it's just a shame because, again, Southern California is really a beautiful, beautiful place in terms of just physical beauty and the weather and the beaches. It's hard to believe that Ronald Reagan actually won the state of California twice in the 1980s. It wasn't that long ago, but how things have turned, sadly. But Orange County, where we spend a lot of time, is kind of a little bubble there with a lot of conservatives and Christians and some solid churches there. Pastor Greg Laurie, Pastor Jack Hibbs, both based there, and some others. And of course, TBN has one of their hubs there. So that's where I'm coming from. That's where I'm at. I had a red-eye flight, landed back on the East Coast about 4 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm a little upside down right now after a week in California. But all good, because we've got a lot to talk about today here on the live stream. Hey, I assume if you're here with us on the live stream that you are with us frequently and are already a subscriber. If you are not, hey, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We're posting every day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekend, depending on the news cycle. And when it comes to the Middle East, an area, a region which never sleeps, the news cycle can be pretty active, to say the least. And we start today with breaking news regarding Israel and Turkey. Now, many times here in our comments, I will see comments of people saying, hey, you need to talk more about Turkey and Turkey's prophetic role. And folks, believe me, I am very aware, very cognizant of what is happening in Turkey under the radical rule of Recep Erdogan. And I fully well know the prophetic implications. I believe Turkey will be part of that Ezekiel invasion force. So we've talked about that coming war of Gog and Magog. More on that later. But so I'm very aware. It's just that Erdogan over the past year has been, at least it's all relative in his terms, on his best behavior, I guess you would say. Again, just for the past year or so. And why is that? Why suddenly is Recep Erdogan reaching out to Israel and Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, his adversaries, who've been his adversaries for the past decade? Could it have something to do with incredibly high inflation in Turkey and an economic mess in that country? I think so. And I think that's the main driving force behind this sudden charm offensive of Recep Erdogan. But today, the breaking news I mentioned at the top, Turkey has now restored relations with Israel, full diplomatic relations. And again, this is Turkey, folks. This is a nation ruled by Recep Erdogan for the past 20 years, someone who's compared Israel to Nazis, accused Israel of genocide against the Palestinians, referred to Israel as a terrorist state. Now, all of a sudden, he's warmly embracing Israel. Well, we'll see how warm the embrace is, but clearly underlying economic factors here, no doubt. So we're going to break that down. Also, we want to break down comments, speaking of the Palestinians, comments by Mahmoud Abbas. Did you hear about this? Did you maybe read about this? Made in Berlin, in Germany, yesterday, alongside German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Abbas accused Israel of perpetrating holocausts against the Palestinians. He's talking about Jews committing a Holocaust in the land where the Holocaust was planned, in Germany. So German leaders were not too thrilled about this, to say the least. So we'll talk about that as well, and where Abbas is at in terms of his approach to Israel. Folks, he's in the same place he's always been, inherently antagonistic to the Jewish state and to the mere existence of the Jewish state. So we'll talk about that. We also want to talk about speaking of Jews and persecution, and we talk, of course, a lot about Christian persecution here in the newscast as well, but in this case, we've had some 20,000 Russian Jews flee Russia since Russia invaded Ukraine back in February. Wow, that's stunning, folks. How long is that? What's that, about just 6 months or so, under 6 months? 20,000 Jews in under 6 months have fled Russia and made their way to Israel mainly. But now Russia is putting up roadblocks there, as we've discussed here on previous newscasts over the past few weeks. Russia trying to basically disband the Jewish Agency, which is kind of a quasi-governmental organization. It's not an official Israeli government organization, but it works closely with the Israeli government to help facilitate Jewish immigration from Russia and other places. Now, Russia is trying to block the Jewish Agency. So shades of the Soviet days, we'll break that down a bit as well. And of course, I've compared it to a vampire or a zombie that will not die. The Iran nuclear deal. Yes, we have to mention it. There's new demands being made by the Iranian regime. And are you surprised to know that the West is still listening and still trying its best? The US, Britain, France, Germany, still trying its best, its mightiest, to meet the demands of the Iranian regime. Please, Ayatollahs, don't hurt us. We'll give you whatever you want. Just leave us alone. We'll give you whatever you want. Billions of dollars, fine. Keep your ballistic missile program, fine. Continue to support Hamas and Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Houthis, other terror proxies across the region, fine. Just don't blow us up with a nuclear bomb. That's a very rudimentary translation of what Western leaders have been transmitting to their Iranian counterparts at the negotiating table in Vienna. Just don't hurt us. Please, we beg you. Isn't that sad? Isn't that pathetic? These not only have shade, this is Neville Chamberlain times 10 on the appeasement scale. We got to talk about it, and we will talk about it. And questions. Remember, next, let's see, last, I should say, 15 to 20 minutes of this live stream, as I'm just pulling up a window here right now. Pardon me for a second here, guys. Now I can see the chat. Okay, here we go. I could not see the chat. Now I see you all, and I can see what you are saying in a very lively Watchman chat. We got to talk about all of these issues, and we will start with Turkey and Israel. First, a quick shout out to everyone. Someone, Luri, says, seriously pathetic. One of our commenters, one of our viewers here, in terms of the West negotiating with Iran, still, despite it all, including the attempted assassination of Salman Rushdie, the best-selling author, on U.S. soil by an Iranian regime sympathizer just a few days ago. Nothing, it seems, can push the United States away from that negotiating table with Iran. We have a very lively chat going on. Okay, this is great. Okay, very, very good. Okay, we have people from all over the world watching. This is great, as always. Very good. Someone says, nope. One of our premium members, Nicole, says, nope, I do not trust Turkey. Neither do I. Let's break it down and break down why I don't. Let me preface this by saying, number one, love the Turkish people. And someone commented earlier, obviously, Paul, the Apostle Paul, spent a lot of time in Turkey, wrote some of his letters from there in the New Testament. Obviously, the Ottoman Empire was a game changer in that nation, ruled over Jerusalem for 5 centuries. The Ottoman Empire lasted for over 5 centuries. In its heyday, it reached the gates of Vienna, ironically enough, twice, ruled over parts of Hungary, drove into the Balkans, ruled over a chunk of Eastern, even a little bit of Central Europe. That was the Turkish-led Ottoman Empire, the Turkish-led Islamic Caliphate. Now, Recep Erdogan, in my view, the current Turkish president, wants to revive that caliphate, bring back those glory days. He would like to be the modern-day caliph who presides over the Islamic world. Remember, the first caliphate, and it's a funny word, I know, but if you don't know what it is, important that you do, because at the end of the day, every Islamic terror organization wants this. They want the restoration of the caliphate in some shape or form, whether it's Shia, Sunni. They might have a different vision of it, but they want the caliphate. They want a united Islamic state. In their greatest dreams, it would be a global Islamic state, and every nation would be under their control. But in the very least, the Islamic world united under the control, under the leadership of one supreme leader. That is the goal, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. And ISIS, remember, established a mini caliphate back in 2014, 2015 in Iraq and Syria, and the Iranian regime as well. Look, they have a different conception than the Sunni jihadis like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, the Iranians being Shia, of course, but they still want that. They want to unite the Islamic world under their leadership. Now, it would be a Shia leadership, of course, and some 85% of the Islamic world is Sunni, not to get too in the weeds here or confuse you. But just know there are similar aims here among the various radical factions that stretch across Islamic theological lines. That said, the last caliphate was disbanded in 1924 after World War I. Turkey was the last seat of the caliphate. That all was gone in 1924, and Kemal Ataturk came to power in Turkey, and he went all in, folks, full bore on transforming Turkey into a secular state, a fiercely secular state, really led by a powerful military and security apparatus that, again, was fiercely secular. Women took the veil off. It opened up. Turkey joined NATO. I believe it was in the 1950s. Turkey and Greece both joined NATO. So Turkey became a NATO member nation. And from essentially the 1920s on, Turkey was a loyal and strong strategic ally of the West and of Israel. Turkey aligned closely as a NATO member nation with the United States. Also, very strong relationship with the Jewish state. Things were going pretty well overall. It wasn't all peaches and cream, but things were going well overall for decades. And then, and Turkey was a bulwark against Soviet communism. It's a bridge between Asia and Europe. So look on your map where Turkey, the location of Turkey, so strategically located. Again, that bridge between two continents, and a bulwark against the Soviets and against Islamic radicalism, by the way. And then 2002 rolled around, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who had once been the mayor of Istanbul, Turkey, who had actually spent some time in prison for radical statements he had made while he was mayor of Istanbul, including a poem where he talked about basically jihad. I don't have it in front of me, but he talked about, I believe, minarets being bayonets, and the mosques are our barracks, and language like that. Again, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting directly. I don't have his poem in front of me, but he got in deep water with that from Turkey's then secular leadership. But lo and behold, again, fast forward to 2002, and suddenly Recep Erdogan is the leader of Turkey, this NATO member nation. Who is he? Folks, he is an Islamist. He's not an Islamist that the kind of Islamist you may be thinking of, where you might be thinking Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and these guys, they look the part, long beards, waging jihad in the field with an RPG over their shoulder. No, Erdogan, to me, is much more dangerous because he fits the Muslim Brotherhood mold. That is, and I've interviewed Muslim Brotherhood leaders throughout Europe. They wear suits and ties. They are Western educated. They come across, or at least they appear, very respectable. If you interview them, they may sound even reasonable. But that veneer, that moderate veneer, masks a radical agenda. At the end of the day, yes, the Muslim Brotherhood movement globally, and ISIS, Al-Qaeda, these jihadi movements, they certainly have different tactics. The Brotherhood's tactic is slowly. We will win elections. We will become a part of the political apparatus in a certain nation. We will ingrain ourselves in the media, in academia, in pivotal government positions, in the mosques. And that's how we'll take power, slowly, gradually, an enemy within kind of strategy, a more incremental strategy. And then the final stage of that, when they have the numbers, they have the power, they have the influence, is armed jihad, armed war. So they really then will take over the state. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, their ilk, they want it all now. They want jihad now. They want to kill you, blow you up now. There's no strategy, no kind of long game. They're in it now. They're in it to win it, in their view, right now. But it ends up in the same place. Different strategies, no doubt, right? Different tactics, different techniques, a different outlook on how to go about it. But the ultimate goal remains the same. Whether you're a Muslim Brotherhood Islamist in a suit and tie speaking at some forum in London, or you're an ISIS jihadi on the battlefields of Syria. Vastly different strategy, but they both want the same thing at the end. Different ways of getting there. But the end game is, drum roll please, the restoration of the caliphate. That's the end game. The restoration of the Islamic caliphate under one supreme ruler, a caliph. That is what they're working towards. They're just going about it in a different way. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, and why am I talking about the Brotherhood in relation to Recep Erdogan? Well, his Freedom and Justice Party, AKP, they call it in Turkey, that is essentially the Turkish branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Why do you think Erdogan was furious when Egyptian President El-Sisi overthrew the Brotherhood back in 2013? Erdogan was furious because he saw the Brotherhood. And at the time, look, I wrote a book called, ironically enough, The Brotherhood, about the Muslim Brotherhood movement, folks. About a decade ago, I was living and breathing everything the Brotherhood was up to. 2012, 2013, they were ascendant. They won elections in Tunisia. They were growing stronger in Jordan. And the big prize, when Mohammed Morsi became president of Egypt, a Muslim Brotherhood leader in Egypt, and things truly looked to be moving in the direction of the Brotherhood strategy winning out. The long game they had played was finally working out and paying off. They took advantage of chaos. The Arab Spring, so-called, I called it an Islamist winter because that's what it devolved into. That 2011, 2012, that is when the Brotherhood was at its apex. And they were taking advantage of these governments toppling in Arab states, Egypt foremost among them. Would you believe? It's hard to believe that Egypt went through 2 revolutions in the span of 2 or 3 years. The most populous Arab nation, the most influential Arab nation. People say, as Egypt goes, so goes the Arab world, so goes the Muslim world. That's how important Egypt is. And it went through 2 massive revolutions with 1 million people in the streets of Cairo within the span of 2 or 3 years. The span of about 2 years. 2011, the winter time, February 2011, then July 2013. Hard to believe, right? We live in, and that was almost a decade ago now, over a decade, the first revolution. Hey, we live in perilous times, but these are Bible times. And when it comes to the Middle East, expect the unexpected. If the so-called Arab Spring taught us anything, it was that. But bringing it back, the Muslim Brotherhood lasted in leadership in Egypt only for about, 2 years or so, even less than that. And Morsi was overthrown. He was taking the country into a disastrous direction. It was going to become a terror hub that would have eventually initiated war with Israel. I truly believe that if the Muslim Brotherhood had remained in power in Egypt. El-Sisi stepped in, overthrew the Brotherhood. Erdogan did not like that. Literally, his Muslim brothers were overthrown. At the time, again, Erdogan, who's always angling to be the leader of the Islamic world. Remember that. He saw all of his allies, the dominoes were toppling, his allies were ascendant, and then they weren't. And once the Brotherhood fell in Egypt, it all kind of came crashing down. I would argue that the Brotherhood's main power base now is the West, in the United States and Europe, where they operate with these so-called civil rights organizations, non-governmental organizations that are Brotherhood sympathizers. They have the Brotherhood agenda, Hamas sympathizers in many cases over the years. But nonetheless, look, the Brotherhood's been down this road before. And I would argue that Recep Erdogan in Turkey, and we'll get to the Turkey-Israel news today in a minute, but this is important backdrop, I believe, for you to understand why today was so important. Erdogan, to me, is the most visible Muslim Brotherhood leader in the world today. No doubt. He's the most visible manifestation of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. Once Egypt, once Morsi, the Brotherhood was toppled there in 2013, Erdogan became the guy. Look, don't forget, Hamas is the self-described Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. So you have the Brotherhood and Erdogan, and it's no surprise on that count that they're close. Erdogan has hosted Hamas leaders, has pledged support for Hamas over the years. So it all kind of lines up. But they are the two most visible manifestations of the Muslim Brotherhood movement right now. Turkey, under Erdogan's rule, and Hamas. Now, under Erdogan's rule is a key point. He came to power in 2002, and things have trended downward, obviously, since then. More on that in a second. One more quick point about the Brotherhood and why they're so important. The Muslim Brotherhood, known as the Ikhwan in the Middle East and the Muslim world, it's the gateway. I call the Brotherhood the gateway to terror. Founded in the early 1920s in Egypt. Eventually, they became the gateway for Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, various ISIS leaders, all of them. Before they formed, before they joined Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they belonged to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is where they got their ideological training. There was a Brotherhood leader, or thinker, I should say, by the name of Sayyid Qutb. He wrote a book called Milestones. You can do the research. And this was a favorite of many Al-Qaeda leaders and infamous jihadists. It really had a profound influence on them. Sayyid Qutb, a guy who spent time in the United States, by the way, in Colorado, of all places, wrote this book, Milestones. Very influential. So it's the gateway drug, is the Muslim Brotherhood, to violent jihad. It's a hop, skip, and a jump to drifting into violence after you are indoctrinated in the Brotherhood ideology. Okay, that's important to mention. And it's important that you know that so that you understand Recep Erdogan. The current Turkish leader came to power in 2002. And as I said, things between him, the West, and Israel started to unravel. Number one, 2003, the U.S., a NATO ally, and other NATO member nations ready to invade Iraq, take out Saddam Hussein. Turkey would not let them use Turkish airspace. Now, you might say, we should have never invaded Iraq in the first place. We shouldn't have been there. Okay, that's a separate conversation. But the bottom line is, when you have a NATO ally there who could have really helped facilitate things and make it a bit easier, and historically over the decades, before Erdogan, Turkey would have said, yeah, we're in this together. We're NATO member nations. Saddam's a bad guy. Use our airspace. That didn't happen. That was the first early indicator of, something has changed here under Erdogan's leadership. Now, fast forward 20 years. Again, he came into power in 2002. What have we seen in those 20 years? We've seen him align himself more and more closely with Russia, Iran, China, Hamas, other rogue actors around the world. He was just in Iran last month, meeting with Vladimir Putin and the Iranian leadership. Talking about a prophetic postcard there, the three of them raising each other's arms in victory. Not only that, the rhetoric slamming the West many times, slamming his fellow NATO, his supposed NATO allies. Not only that, slamming Israel, folks. I don't use this word lightly, viciously. Besides Iran, other than the Iranian regime, there is no more vocally, publicly anti-Israel, and I'll use the word anti-Semitic leader than Recep Erdogan. From comparing Israel to Hitler, calling Israel genocidal, state terrorists, from declaring that Jerusalem is ours, meaning Turkey's, I assume, meaning the Muslim world's, consistently threatening Israel over Jerusalem, to the Mavi Marmara incident, 2010. You remember what that was? I know the name, funny name. It was a flotilla. They called it the Gaza Flotilla. This was in the spring of 2010. Long story short, to review, this flotilla left Turkey with the full blessing of the Turkish government. It was a flotilla that included terrorists. It was floating towards Israel. The Israel Defense Forces intercepted the boat. They boarded the boat, or a few of these boats, and a battle ensued, and several of these terrorists were killed. And Turkey was not very happy about that. And Turkish-Israeli relations plummeted after that, and only went downhill from 2010. 2018, Erdogan up those old tricks, comparing Israel to Nazis, accusing Israel of genocide, and essentially diplomatic relations were cut. Ambassadors, which is a big deal, of course. Israel's ambassador to Turkey was called home. Turkey's ambassador to Israel was called home. And in the meantime, by the way, 2016, in the midst of all that, there was, and there's still a lot of debate over this, there was an attempted coup against Erdogan, according to Erdogan. There's still a lot of debate. Some people think it was actually a purge by Erdogan, a pretext to clear out and lock up his enemies. So we may never get the full story there, but that was a big deal. In July 2015, it looked like Erdogan was ready to be overthrown, possibly, but he and his allies prevailed in that attempted coup, if it was indeed an attempted coup. Again, it's still murky. But that brings us to today and what happened today. Now, over the past year, really, there's been a gradual thawing of relations between Turkey and Israel. Now, part of that was probably because Bibi was not in power. Erdogan and Bibi went at it a few times in terms of just statements about each other, and rightfully so that Bibi was making statements about Erdogan. He's a radical Islamist who is viciously anti-Israel. Folks, I'm putting aside what happened today. Okay, diplomatic relations restored. That's great. It doesn't change who he is. That leopard has not changed its spots. And credit to Bibi Netanyahu for calling it like it was and calling Erdogan out. So, but the other side of that is, as long as Bibi was in office, there wouldn't be that coming back together of Turkey and Israel. But when Bennett took office last year, the now former Israeli prime minister, there was a gradual thawing of relations. And now Yair Lapid, the interim Israeli prime minister until November 1st, at least, when Israel holds yet another round of elections, and Netanyahu is favored and his Likud party are favored to once again prevail. But we'll see. A lot can happen between now and then. But Bibi seems to have the inside track. But Lapid will hail this as a great diplomatic victory, I'm sure. And they had the announcement today. Ambassadors, eventually, we didn't get a firm date on it. Turkey will now return its ambassador to Israel. Israel will return its ambassador to Turkey. They will exchange consul generals once again, which is another big part of restoring full diplomatic relations. They will also, according to a statement today, broaden their economic and trade ties, their cultural ties. You still have many Israelis going to Turkey for vacation. It's a very popular vacation destination for Israelis, even though, as we reported extensively here in the newscast the past few months, we've had this series of Iranian terror plots against Israeli tourists on Turkish soil. Turkey and Israel reportedly worked together to break those plots up. But now there's this warming of relations, and folks, color me very skeptical. The title to this newscast, and if you're just joining us, is Israel. If you're just joining us, by the way, if you missed anything the first 30 minutes, this will be posted. We're done, and you can check it out in our archives. It seems that we have maybe technical difficulty real quick on Zoom. Daniel, can you still hear me? Okay, good. All right, folks, we're still with you. Sorry about that. Something flashed up on my laptop screen about my Zoom audio, but if you can still hear me, give me a thumbs up, everyone, in the chat. And Daniel can hear me, our trusty producer, so that's good. But so full diplomatic relations restored. We said at the top, and again, you can check it out in our archives if you missed any of this newscast. We said at the top that this is a marriage of convenience, I guess you would say. Big problems right now. Big problems right now economically for Turkey. And let's see here. Okay, thumbs up. Everyone can hear. Good. Okay, thanks, guys. Thank you for that. So this is a self-preservation for Erdogan. And it's not just Israel that he's warming up to. It's the Sunni Arab nations, the anti-Muslim Brotherhood. Surprise, surprise. Sunni Arab nations like Egypt, which has banned the Brotherhood, like the United Arab Emirates, which has banned the Brotherhood, and rightfully so, in my opinion. Erdogan, it's no surprise because he's the Turkish Brotherhood. It's no surprise that he's hostile to the anti-Muslim Brotherhood nations, but now he's approaching them and saying, hey, let's talk, let's do business. So Israel and its Sunni Arab nations, and it looks like we're good here on audio. Thanks for the thumbs up, guys. We got it. Now they're back together. Where does this all go? Where does this lead? In the title, I said, Israel and Turkey restore full diplomatic relations. Can Erdogan be trusted? No, he can't be trusted. It was funny. I interviewed Moshe Yalon, the former Israeli defense minister, a few months ago in Jerusalem. And I asked him at point blank, because at the time the charm offensive was in full swing. And I asked Yalon, can Erdogan be trusted? He said, no. It was actually a great moment of candor on camera. I almost laughed out loud because it was just so refreshing. He said, no, you can't trust this guy. No way. And you can. I say about Putin, you can tell a lot about someone by the company he keeps. Well, Erdogan keeps the same company, and you don't accuse Israel of genocide, of state terrorism, of channeling the spirit of Adolf Hitler, as Erdogan has done. You don't host Hamas gladly on your soil and have a sudden heart change, I don't believe. So where is this going? For now, it is beneficial for Turkey. That could change. Look, the next engagement, what happens, folks? Look, Israel has fought engagements against Hamas. He gets worked up about the Islamic Jihad engagements, but when Israel goes toe-to-toe with Hamas, his fellow Muslim Brotherhood branch, that's when Erdogan really gets fired up and really makes the threats and the outrageous comments and slamming Israel. Say Israel and Hamas go toe-to-toe a month from now, 6 months from now. It's entirely possible. What does Erdogan do then? Are relations, no pun intended, blown up once again? So color me very skeptical that this is going to be a warm relationship like it was before 2002 when Erdogan came to power, and that things will be hunky-dory. The slightest movement can set Erdogan off. He's a very unstable individual in my view, and the slightest what he views as a provocation, whether it's in Jerusalem or Gaza, could torpedo this whole thing. And I also think prophecy demands a turn eventually by Turkey against Israel. And I hate to say that. I love the Turkish people. It's a beautiful country, but the Bible seems pretty clear. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, I believe Russia will lead a latter. Some believe Turkey will be the leader of that Gog-Magog invasion. I believe Russia will likely lead it. A country to the uttermost north of Israel, as Ezekiel lays out, joined by Persia, which is modern-day Iran. Turkey, you have funny names, I know, but check out, if you haven't already, Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39 in your Bible. You'll see what I'm talking about, this latter days, last days invasion force. And Turkey, I believe, is either Beth Togarmah or Gomer. Funny names, again, I know. But check it out, and you will see what I mean. They have different names today in 2022 than they did 2,600 years ago. But nonetheless, these are the players, and they are coming together. And prophecy watchers, when we saw Turkey, Iran, Russia together in a very cozy embrace a few weeks ago in Tehran, you know the prophetic time clock is speeding up. And that wasn't the first meeting, by the way. It's been a consistent series of meetings over the past few years between those three nations. Hey, time is getting short. And I knew I was going to get to other topics as well, and I will right now. I only have a short window to do it. But I'm glad we spent 36 minutes on Turkey. Did that, all my Turkey watchers who've been saying in the comments, you're not talking enough about Turkey. They're a major player. And again, some believe Turkey will even lead that Gog-Magog invasion force. I think Russia, Turkey, Iran together will be the three main players in that. I believe Russia will be the big dog there. But Turkey's certainly heavily involved. But hey, by the way, just a reminder, if we disagree on some prophetic things like Psalm 83 or Ezekiel 38, 39, it's not a salvation issue. We are still brothers and sisters in Christ. We can differ on the certain players in the Ezekiel coalition and still all love Jesus and be brothers and sisters in Christ. It's not a salvation issue. It's fascinating to talk about, of course, and we can. It's fun to talk about, and we can go back and forth with it. That's one of the reasons we do what we do. But there are a few quick topics I want to get to before we do Q&A in just a few minutes. Number one, I mentioned Mahmoud Abbas at the top and these comments he made. Basically, he was speaking in Berlin yesterday in Germany alongside the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And I have the direct quote here, folks. I'm just going to glance down my phone. I don't want to misquote our good friend Abu Mazen, as they call him in the Palestinian territories. He said, quote, he refused to condemn the Palestinian terror attack on Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympics. If I'm not mistaken, were 11 Israelis killed at the Munich Olympics? I don't have I'm just going off the top of my head there. So he refused to condemn them, did Mahmoud Abbas. They were martyrs. They were heroes, right? That's his view. And instead, he countered by saying he could, quote, point to 50 Holocausts that Israel has perpetrated upon the Palestinians. Now, we were talking about the Holocaust in Germany. It's very sensitive, obviously. The Germans, look, they've tried to get past that. They know what happened was a monstrous, evil, demonic crime of epic, historic, evil proportions. So when you're talking about that, the German chancellor was visibly uncomfortable, but he didn't correct Abbas like he should have and said, this is a joke, what you're saying. He didn't do that. He let the comment pass without correcting it. Now, afterwards, and I'll quote this directly, the day after, Scholz issued a statement on Twitter saying, here we go. He should have said this in the moment, folks. But instead, he said on Twitter today, I am disgusted by the outrageous remarks made by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. For us Germans in particular, any relativization of the singularity of the Holocaust is intolerable and unacceptable. I condemn any attempt to deny the crimes of the Holocaust, which is exactly what Abbas has done over the years. This isn't the first time, including a dissertation he wrote a few decades ago. He was criticized, was Scholz, in Germany and Israel for not rejecting Abbas's comments immediately at the press conference they held together on Tuesday night in Germany. And let's see. It was a gaffe by Scholz, and Abbas's direct comment, from 1947 until today, Israel has committed 50 massacres in 50 Palestinian villages, 50 slaughters, 50 Holocausts. He's comparing that to the slaughter of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime. And now Abbas is walking it back. This is funny. In a written statement, his office said that President Mahmoud Abbas reaffirms that the Holocaust is the most heinous crime in modern human history. He condemns the Holocaust. He could have fooled me, judging by his statements over the years, his conduct, but that's another story. But there you have it. And I bring this up. Why is it important? Number one, because a Western leader had a chance in the moment. Scholz could have said, wait a minute. I'm not going to let you get away with that. He could have called Abbas out and said, Israel is a free and democratic, open nation. This is madness, what you're saying. He didn't do that. He grimaced, but he let it pass. Man, Scholz, to me, would have got a lot of credibility. Would have earned a lot of credibility if he would have stepped up in the moment instead of issuing a tweet the day after. That's the way things go today, I guess. Twitter is where you do your ideological battle. I also bring it up because Mahmoud Abbas, look, he's the guy, folks, right? He's the chosen one for all the the peace plan proponents in Europe, in the United States, at the UN. Mahmoud Abbas is our guy. Israel, he's a guy we can do business with. We can make peace with him. Can you really? The same Mahmoud Abbas who's engaged in Holocaust denial, the same Mahmoud Abbas whose Palestinian Authority continues to pay the salaries of terrorists who kill Israelis. It's been called the Pay for Slay program, where, say, a Palestinian like the one Sunday night in Jerusalem, who killed, I believe, 3 people in Jerusalem and wounded 4 Americans as well. He then, after committing his crime, whether he dies or he's put in prison, his family get lifetime payments, a lifetime stipend from the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas. And Abbas has refused to end these so-called martyrdom payments. Now, President Trump ended U.S. funding of the Palestinian Authority for this very reason, because his concern, rightly, was that American taxpayer dollars were going to fund, that were given to the Palestinian Authority, hundreds of millions, right? That some of that money was going to fund this so-called martyrdom program and pay the salaries of terrorists. So Trump rightly ended that program, but Joe Biden, of course, a different story, and his administration is embracing Abbas once again and trying to get Israel to make a deal with Mahmoud Abbas. Folks, I don't think it's going to happen. He's in his 80s now as well, and he's not very popular, so he's teetering on the brink. I don't know what comes after him. I pray that a new Palestinian leader comes after Abbas, who is truly moderate and truly says, "Hey, Israel, I want peace. I want to put aside our differences," and has no ulterior motive, but is a forward-thinking, visionary leader. That's, I think, we all pray for, but I don't know that it's going to happen. And I don't know if that leader came along, if he would last very long, because Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the radical forces in Gaza, of course, but in the West Bank, which we call Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel, they're very strong. And any truly moderate Palestinian leader who would rise, at least right now, at this moment in time, would be knocked down, I believe. And it's sad to say, when you have generation after generation of young Palestinian children being brainwashed from the time they're 3 years old to hate Jews, to hate Israel, that Jews are subhuman, then it's going to be very hard to turn things around. And that stretches from Palestinian textbooks in schools to Palestinian television, children's cartoons. It's sick stuff. And this is sick stuff that's endorsed by Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. That's where we're at. I know it's a sad situation, but that's where we are at right now with that. Yet the peace industry, I guess you would call it, the peace plan industry, the Biden administration, chief among them, Europe, they're going to keep it up, just as they're going to keep pushing the Iran nuclear deal. We have the Iran deal lobby as well. And they're trying to keep it alive. We're getting into questions literally in 1 minute here, so keep sending them. But I want to read you just the latest on the Iran deal. A few bullet points. This is what Iran wants now. Iranian officials, and they're still at the negotiating table, Iranian officials will demand the U.S. include a penalty should it ever withdraw from the nuclear deal again. Wow. So Iran is saying, look, we signed the deal in 2015, and then Trump pulled out of it in 2018. They want to guarantee that the U.S. will never pull out of a revived Iran nuclear deal. That's it, and that there'll be some kind of penalty that the U.S. would have to pay if they pull out of the deal. Will the Biden administration agree to that? They just might. That's pretty sad, because Iran knows. Say in 2024, a Republican comes into office who wants to scrap the Iran nuclear deal once again. Then Iran's back at square one, right, where they were in 2018. So they're trying to embed that guarantee in there along with other guarantees. The European Union, Biden diplomats, they're at the negotiating table again in Vienna, folks. Do I look tired when I talk about that? Because I am. Because, again, no matter what Iran does, it seems, the West refuses to walk away from the table. And they want this deal. They want the deal even more than Iran does. And they just might get it. But I don't think the West will kill the deal. Iran will be the one to walk away. What Iran's doing right now is, hey, look, the game of chess was invented in Persia. So they're master chess players. very smart, very cagey what they're doing right now. I hate to say it. They're just dragging this thing out as long as they can, stretching it out, stretching it out, stretching it out. And then one day they have the bomb, or they get as close as possible to the bomb, and they'll put it on pause for a few years under the Iran deal, and they'll take advantage of the billions of dollars in sanctions or relief that they'll get from that deal. And because their ballistic missile program and sponsorship for terror are not part of this deal, they'll continue to do that. Then say 5 years, hey, they'll wait. Even 5 years down the line, the deal ends. Even 10 years down the line, the deal ends. Iran, boom, full speed ahead, restart the program, and they're only a few weeks away, and they break out. All this deal does is kick the can down the road. And that's the bottom line. And that's why Israel is eventually, I believe, going to take military action against Iran's nuclear facilities. I believe it's coming. It's a question not of if, but when. Let's get into questions. And hey, by the way, if you haven't subscribed, I mentioned at the top too, give us a subscribe if you like what you're hearing. We do a live stream every Wednesday, usually Wednesday, sometimes Thursday. And for our premium members, and thank you big time to all of our premium members, we will be doing an exclusive premium member live stream twice a month at least. We did our first about 2 weeks ago. We'll do another one probably next week. And that's something we're revving up to. So if you're interested in premium membership as well, you can check out on the homepage under Join and see what we have there. We think you'll like it. Some pretty good little perks there for our watchmen and women on the wall who are with us every day. We love all of our subscribers and viewers, but we want to offer a little something extra to our loyal fans and viewers who are with us every single day. So check out premium membership if you are interested. Okay, questions. Sandra Bish, a premium member. Question: why does Iran want a deal? Is it for money? Why don't they just do what they want to do? Why does anyone care about this? What is the point? Sandra, I feel your pain. Thank you for the question. And I think Sandra speaks for probably many of us watching right now, this live stream, and thinking, oh my gosh, this again? The Iran nuclear deal, it won't go away. Hey, the Iran nuclear program has been kind of a slow-moving train. Some people have called it the Cuban Missile Crisis in slow motion, really ever since about 2002, when it became apparent that Iran was driving for the bomb. This has been like 2 decades, folks. We had all the run-up to the first Iran deal, 2013, 2014. Then finally, July 2015, the Obama administration signs this disastrous deal with Iran. Then 2018, President Trump pulls out of it. 2021, January, Biden comes into office, and right away, he wants to revive it. And he was talking about it on the campaign trail in 2019, 2020. We knew where this was heading if Biden came into office. And that's exactly what happened. And for the past year and a half, the Biden administration has been trying to cobble back together this Frankenstein's monster known as the Iran nuclear deal. So, Sandra, I get it. But it is important for a few reasons. You asked, why does Iran want a deal? It is for the money. You just said, is it for money? Yeah, that's the main, that's the gist of it. That's the main reason. Iran's economy also has struggled, and sanctions have not been kind to the Iranian regime and the Iranian economy. Sanctions relief. Remember, if the West strikes a deal with Iran, the West will release billions of dollars in sanctions relief that will go into the Iranian regime's coffers. And those billions, they won't be used to, I don't know, build schools and playgrounds and hospitals in Iran. They will be used to destroy schools and playgrounds and hospitals in Israel, because many of those billions will go into the pockets, or at least hundreds of millions of those billions will go into the pockets of Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Iran's various proxies. So Iran, number one, through sanctions relief, gets to bolster its own economy. Number two, it gets to bolster the arsenals of its proxies and further its jihad against Israel. Number three, it gives itself international legitimacy and credibility. Hey, we have a deal with the West. We are a partner to a treaty with the West. And that it gives Iran legitimacy all of a sudden in many people's eyes, including at the UN, which will take the foot off the pedal in terms of pressing Iran. Not that it was pressing Iran too hard anyway, but those are three major reasons right there that this is good for Iran. It is. And also, it does not end their nuclear program. Again, they could sign a 10-year deal. Look, folks, they're very patient. Iran could sign a 10-year deal. And during those 10 years, take all that money in, continue to develop ballistic missiles, which are not on the table in the nuclear deal, continue to develop their terror proxies, which are not on the table in the nuclear deal. And then in 10 years, the deal ends and Iran says, see ya, we're not going to re-up the deal. See you later. The sun set. The sun sets on the deal. And now, you know what? We've decided we want the bomb. We definitely want the bomb. They've never changed their opinion on that. They want the bomb. But they'll say, now's the time to break out. So that's some of the thinking. And it's a great deal for Iran. And it's an awful deal for the world. And Israel is watching this very closely, folks. And they will eventually act. If the deal happens, they will certainly act. If the deal doesn't happen, Israel will also be forced to act. That's the only thing that's really going to stop Iran's nuclear weapons program. Let's be honest, and no one wants to see it, is a military strike. Not a war with Iran, but precision strikes against those nuclear facilities. I don't want to see it. No one wants to see it. But if you want to end Iran's nuclear program, it's probably the only sure bet. Because, again, you're kicking the can down the road with the Iran deal, and once it runs out, then what happens? They can break out, and they're very close on that breakout time. So let's be honest. Let's lay all the cards on the table. You might not want to see it. No one wants to see it, but it is the ultimate solution, it would seem, the ultimate answer to Iran's nuclear ambitions. Take out those nuclear facilities, and it's not going to be easy. They are hardened. They're deep underground. There are various facilities, but if you doubt that Israel's going to do it, take a quick look at history. 1981, Israel took out Iraq's nuclear reactor under Saddam Hussein. 2007, Israel took out the Assad regime's reactor in Syria. Whenever a rogue regime that is hostile to Israel in Israel's backyard attempts to develop nuclear weapons, Israel's going to act. It's going to act eventually, I believe, against Iran, unless in the meantime, something happens, perhaps sabotage. Israel's carried out so many sabotage attacks against Iran's nuclear facilities over the years. We'll see. Israel has certainly set back the Iranian nuclear program at times, but this regime is possessed, some would say, with developing the bomb. So they're not giving up. It's a collision course, no doubt. Let's get to another question. That was a good one. It was good to break that down for everyone, too, about the Iran nuclear deal. Let's see what we have here. Let's see, guys. I'm just looking at the questions. Gnarly News. I like that name. Gnarly News asks, do you think maybe the deal that will divide Israel will have possession of the Temple Mount attached? Well, it will be the division of Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount certainly, in prophetic terms, that you would think that 7-year peace treaty that the Antichrist will eventually broker between Israel and its enemies, the Temple Mount's got to be central to that, right? And a third temple and everything that we know is coming. Temple Mount is central to all of that. So certainly it seems in that 7-year peace treaty, Gnarly News, good question. Yes, the Temple Mount will be an integral part of what is coming. Someone asked about this drone competition that I talked about yesterday. That was Nikki Bauer. Did Turkey take part in the Iranian drone competition? It did not. And I think probably the main reason for that, Nikki, was that Armenia is also a part of it. Turkey and Armenia do not get along. Think of the Armenian genocide of 1918, 1 million Armenians slaughtered by the Ottomans. But this drone competition, if you missed it, I talked about on yesterday's newscast. They're calling it a contest or a tournament or a competition. It's being hosted in Iran right now. Russia is there, Belarus is there, and Armenia is there. And for the next 2 weeks, they're testing out various Iranian-made attack drones and having a little tournament. How nice. It's not exactly March Madness. It's August Madness in a literal sense in Iran with this tournament using Iran's drone technology. And look, Iran, I called it Iran's drone dynasty, a drone superpower on yesterday's newscast. That's what they're trying to become. Let's see what else we have here. Donovan Mitchell, not to be confused with Donovan Mitchell of Utah Jazz. Sir, I have a question. What are we going to do about Venezuela, Nicaragua, and El Salvador? They are with Iran, China, and Russia. Yes, Donovan, great point and great question. I've been making this point over the past several weeks. We have a big problem in our hemisphere. I'm in America, so I say our. We have viewers here from all over the world on every continent practically. But yes, at America's southern doorstep, on one hand, America's southern border with Mexico is completely porous, of course. That's one issue. On the other hand, we have these radical left-wing Marxist dictatorships that are anti-Western, anti-Israel, and pro-Russia, China, Iran coming to power. I recently did produced a 1 hour special for TBN called The Gathering Storm Against America. It focused on Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and their alliance. But I also touched on Latin America. This is very dangerous. Venezuela, Nicaragua, you named the two main players. Cuba, of course, still. These are regimes that have a rosy relationship with America's enemies at America's doorstep. When I was a kid in school, we learned about the Monroe Doctrine, the United States not allowing a foreign power, hostile foreign power, to entrench itself in the Western Hemisphere, and yet China controls the Panama Canal. And Venezuela, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Latin America, folks, is turning in the wrong direction, a Marxist, leftist, anti-American, anti-Israel direction. Just so you know, keep a close eye on what's going on in Latin America. Upcoming elections in Brazil will be huge. Chile just went hard left. Mexico is run by a hard leftist. And again, Venezuela, Nicaragua, El Salvador, not a good trend in Latin America. Last question from Angela O'Keefe. Eric, where did you get your T-shirt? Jerusalem. Can you see this, folks, with the Lion of Judah, the Lion of Jerusalem on it? It's one of my favorite shirts. I got this shirt from Kufi, Christians United for Israel, kufi.org. If they still have their shop online, I used to work with Kufi, of course. If they still have their online store, you can pick up this Jerusalem shirt at cufi.org. Always like give my old friends at Kufi a shout out. They do great work. cufi.org to get the shirt. Jerusalem, the one and only, the city of the great king. Hey, that's an hour. Time is up, folks. This was great. We had thousands of people with us from all around the world. And hey, it was fun to get into some topics, to do a deep dive on Turkey, a deep dive on the Iran deal. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining us today. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.